You know how in Hollywood they say do one for you and then you get to do one for— no, wait. You know how in Hollywood they say do one for them and then you can do one for you? Like, put out your fucking Iron Man or your Avengers and then you get to make a little small independent film starring you, Robert De Niro, and some person you never heard of, and 5 people see it and you feel really proud of yourself. Well, that's what this video is. It's the part of the latter, because my shitbox videos and the build vlogs, that's the kind of thing I can post to Reddit and give myself some exposure. But once in a while I like to do a video just for the fans, the hardcore fans. And what better way to do a video just for the fans, for the regular viewers, than with a Q&A video where I take your questions submitted to me via YouTube private message, YouTube comments, Twitter, Reddit, and some other sources as well, and some that I may have just made up, and I put them all together in a video for you guys to watch. Okay, so the first question comes from you in the future, and that question is, Jeff, are you drunk? No, I am absolutely not. I'm actually a teetotaler. I have never had a drink of alcohol in my life, for the record. I'm just really, really tired. I've had a long, boring ass week. I'm actually doing some studying for an exam, which is why I'm doing this kind of a video tonight. I didn't want to put a lot of production value into it. So yes, I'm tired, I'm groggy, and I'm gonna study in between shooting here. So just kind of, you know. Anyway, the first real question we have on the docket comes from an anonymous user on Reddit, and that user says, have you ever tried your hand at custom water cooling components secondhand? And the answer in general is no, I have not considered it, and no, I have not ever done it. And the reason being is that the kind of PC technician who puts together custom client builds that feature custom loops are the sort of person that has a very select clientele and has a specific attention to detail with a patience for handiwork, and that isn't me. To be honest with you, I have relatively small hands for a big guy, but they're still clumsy, and they remember when they were fat. They were 100 pounds heavier in this body, and they still function like a fat person's hands. Not very good with them, to be honest with you. I hate working on laptops. I do not do phones. I only do desktops because they're big. And when it comes to routing fucking tubes and applying fittings, fuck, man. Okay, next question is from an anonymous Reddit user again. Really suspicious, makes it look like I'm making this shit up. You once pointed out that GPUs are outpacing CPUs in terms of relative performance. That is true. How are we going to avoid chronic bottlenecking in the future if this trend continues? Well, there are actually a number of ways that this is being addressed. Number one, developers have become more conscientious of this. They have begun the process of forcing multi-thread optimization in their game design. This is very labor intensive though, and the cost is being passed on to the consumers, causing a bit of a spike in game prices. And I know this is not easy to swallow for the gaming public, but it is true. Believe it or not, most of these companies are not out to gouge you. They're not trying to take any more money from you than they feel their product is worth, but they do have rising development costs they need to account for, and this is one of them. Now, of course, you have DX12 and Vulkan that are coming to markets very slowly. We do not have them at full ubiquity yet. There are still lots of games right now that are being built on DX11, so it's not like they're everywhere yet, but we are in the process, and those two are making it easier for developers to multi-thread optimize, which is, of course, going to relieve pressure off of CPU 0, which is what we're all trying to achieve. Making multi-core optimization is better for the long run for everybody. Everybody who's got a CPU, no matter which it is, being able to use the remaining 75 to 87% of your CPU rather than just having it fucking sit idle during a game that puts all the load on CPU 0 is a great thing. So those are two ways that it's being approached from a development side. Thirdly, we have the hardware solution, which is Intel and AMD saying, okay, finally we're at the point where developers are getting the hint that we are sort of hitting the limit of what silicon can do in terms of single-threaded performance, and they're starting to multi-thread optimize, so we will accommodate them accordingly. AMD with Zen, it looks like, is going to push the envelope forward. They're going to sort of force Intel's hands. It looks like they may have a 6 or 8 core option at the consumer desktop price level, as opposed to making it a $1,700 enthusiast chip like Intel does. That will put significant pressure on the competition and make them come up with something to compete. I wouldn't expect miracles. Intel has a way of sort of muscling their way into first place no matter what, but it should at least bring some change. And So if they cannot make any single-threaded advancements in terms of its relative performance over generations, at the very least, we're going to see the core count in a lot of these CPUs increase. I think we are getting to the era now where 6-core, 12-thread CPUs are going to be mainstream. The i7 is coming to an end in terms of its status as a top-tier CPU on the consumer socket. Now, AMD was ahead of the curve on this. They took that approach back in fucking 2011. They were like, whoa, fucking tell, we can't compete with them in terms of single-threaded performance. Well, what we can do is we can put 8 fucking cores in a consumer desktop chip, and that's what they sort of did, even though they didn't really do that. I mean, it's not really an 8-core CPU. So ultimately, that's the way hardware makers are alleviating the problem, or trying to contribute to the relief of stress off of CPU zero. So another way that this problem is being addressed is through resolution size. So as graphical fidelity becomes better, as assets become richer, as textures become prettier, we are putting more emphasis on bigger. Fit more pixels onto the screen. That brings down frame rate comparatively and prevents these massive draw call bottlenecks from happening on CPU zero, even in DirectX 11 games. So, for example, I recently had some trouble with Grim Dawn, which is based on the Titan Quest engine in 2006, and upon doing further research, I learned that it's because that game is very poorly optimized for one, and it runs on a single core. So it's not the kind of game, despite the fact that it's not very graphically complicated, that can run on an older CPU with poor single-threaded performance. Now, a way to alleviate this, of course, is to play the game at a lower frame rate, at a bigger resolution, and you will notice everything smooths out just nicely, because CPU zero is not under significant duress. So this, of course, is another way that the problem is sort of being circumvented. It's not being solved directly, but they're kind of saying, okay, so maybe 200 frames per second isn't the kind of thing you're going to be able to see anytime soon, but what we can do is give you nice, big, pretty pictures. We can give you 8K displays someday that are so fucking fine and detailed, you'd have to have like twice of the perfect person's vision on a standard size like 27-inch monitor to see a fucking difference between it and 4K. It's just that fine. Anyway, moving on to the next question. I am happy with 1080p at 60, says this one user. What's the best graphics card I could possibly need for the next 5 years if I wanted to keep enjoying max settings at this resolution? Okay, this is a very interesting question because this is right in my wheelhouse. The best way to answer this question is like this. Go back in time. Go to 2012, early 2012, which is almost 5 years ago, to the birth of the 28nm era, and you got your 7970 and your GTX 680. And ask yourself how those held up over the last 5 years, and I think you'll roughly have your answer with a few exceptions. So, I've had lots of those cards, and I can safely tell you that no, they cannot give you 1680 by 1050, which was the resolution at the time, kind of performance at 60 frames per second average on modern games today. So if that card is 5 years old and it's still sitting in your system, and you're one of the people who is in this predicament, because many people still are, I'm sure you can attest to this. There are some games that come to market, modern games, the newest games, the most graphically demanding, that the 7970 is not going to be able to just strictly max out with all the settings pushed all the way up. And still get 60 frames per second at that resolution. And it certainly can't do it at 1080p, which is today's modern standard. But you compare all that to the 1080 today and the fact that the majority of monitors still being sold for gaming purposes are 1080p, and you have a much better pairing than you had back then. So as where the 7970 and the 680 were targeting 60 frames per second at 1680 by 1050, now you've got the GTX 1080, which is absolutely obliterating 1080p. Often twice or 3 times as fast, even with modern games today. So you can expect that it has a lot more legs to it, I would suspect. And you couple that with the fact that the law of diminishing returns on graphical fidelity once again applies. As we get closer and closer to emulating reality on the screen, the demand for graphical fidelity will slowly level off. You see, you start down here, and then you get your big old fucking incline, and then that incline starts to level off, and you get up to the top, and it kind of sort of plateaus. It still rises, There's still going to be an increase in that polygon count. Things are going to look sharper and more detailed. But generally speaking, developers are going to take a look at what they've made, and they're going to go, okay, that's enough. Let's devote some more resources to better story and better voice acting and all other things that make a game good. And we'll leave these gorgeous fucking pictures that we've created exactly where they are. So all these things coupled together makes me think that cards like the 1080 are actually going to have very long legs by comparison to cards from 2012. So as where my answer to this question 5 years ago would have been the 7970 or GTX 680, and then probably not, my 2017 answer answer is definitely the 1080 would be perfectly fine, and I think we'll have very long legs. The 1070 might even cut it as well, but I don't think cards like the 1060 or RX 480 are going to have much of a shot beyond the next 2 or 3 years. What helps this process along is the fact that 1080p is a very old resolution, and it seems to be staying put despite the fact that people everywhere are pushing 1440p as the new hotness. So we'll see what happens, but that's my prediction. Okay, so it's tomorrow now, and I just realized that I spent 10 whole minutes blathering on about 3 questions. So for the last little bit here, what we're going to do is do some rapid fire questions. So here we go. What do you think of the new unlocked i3 coming with Kaby Lake? Intel had no choice because non-K overclocking was a thing that was happening. All of their efforts to circumvent it were subsequently circumvented by the board makers. We're talking about external clock generators that are being used now to make it happen, and it doesn't seem to be working to try and curb that. So I think they're acquiescing, and they're just saying, fine, we'll give you a fucking i3 that unlocks. I'm looking forward to seeing how they perform. It's really interesting. It should have existed a long time ago. When the fuck is Vega coming out? I don't know, because AMD's release schedule is so sporadic, and they're really, really bad at keeping up with NVIDIA in terms of pacing. So NVIDIA is firing on all cylinders. When they design an architecture, they come up with 3 or 4 different die sizes for that architecture, and they just pump them out as fast as they can. They're pumping them out so fast, in fact, they had to subcontract their chip making to Samsung this time, in addition to TSMC, because TSMC just couldn't keep up. They're already maxed out and doing phone stuff mostly. So I don't even think I care about Vega anymore. I don't think, even with the presence of HBM2, if it does in fact have HBM2, it's going to be that much better than Pascal, because again, the memory can be really fast, but if the GPU sucks, the GPU sucks. And although I don't think it'll suck, I don't think it's going to be substantially better, even in the best case of scenarios. Who is your favorite tech YouTuber? I would say Louis Rossmann or Ben Heck. They know a lot more about electronics in general than I do, and I am fascinated by what they have to say, so I would suggest you watch them. Ben Heck especially has production value. Louis Rossmann is incredibly knowledgeable, but it's basically just sitting there watching him work. But Ben Heck's videos are like Mythbusters, but with old school electronics and personal projects and things like that. Also, I like Sexy Cyborg too. Yeah. What do you think about Terry Crews designing a build with Jay's 2 cents? I think it's great for exposure. Any additional press that the PC Master Race gets, and the more that PC gaming comes into the mainstream, we all benefit. Everyone down the chain, from people at the very bottom who are just casual gamers but still have a desktop grade graphic PC thing, to people like me who build stuff out of used shit, to everyone from fucking Linus to Jay himself and all that stuff. Everyone benefits. What game are you most looking forward to playing? I would say Dragon's Dogma Darkness Arisen, which I picked up in the last Humble Monthly. It was the early unlock. I'm currently still playing through Grim Dawn when I have a chance, but when that's over, I think Dragon's Dogma is next on the docket, because it looks like it's a pretty solid console port, and people have nothing but good things to say about it. When is your next build vlog? Soon, I hope. I'm going to maybe do a shopping video first, because I think I'm going to try to build a competitor for the shitbox. I really like building the super cheap PCs, as much as the mid-range ones are the best price performers. I think the ones that sort of fall into that $200 to $300 range, I like trying to go with sub 100 and stuff like that. So we'll see what we can do. Why do you wear plain t-shirts in your videos? I don't advertise. I don't pay you for your shirt so that I can walk around with a fucking billboard advertising your shit. Simple as that. So I always keep it plain. Same with that with me in real life. I hate clothing that has a logo. I bought sweatpants recently that have the Roots logo on the top of the leg. It's dark enough that I don't care, but still, even that I'm a little bit put off by. If the sweatpants weren't so fucking good, I would care. Anyway, thanks for watching once again. We're gonna call that one a video. Sorry for the quick, poorly produced Q&A style video this time around, because I had just a busy week and I couldn't put together something that was more substantive with higher production quality. Not that I'm particularly advanced in that sort of department anyway. At OFA on Twitter, or OFA on Reddit, hit me up with questions or comments for the next Q&A video maybe. Anything you want to see from me as well. I'm open to suggestions. If you have some things you'd like me to cover, you'd like me to take over my workbench there and show you, I would be happy to do. So again, thanks for watching. I'll see you in the next one.